ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Is It Worth the Gold review. Today we are looking at the Skoda T-40, the Tier 6 Czech Premium Medium Tank. As of yet, you cannot really buy it on its own on EU server. It's only bundled up in some shitty fucking bundle with some crap in it and costs around 20 euros. And for that price, this shit is definitely not worth the gold. But for its price, it should be around 15-16 euros if it ever makes it to just a regular premium store. You might argue, but as always, let's start a review with the actual armor, which you have none of. You have the thickest armor on this thing is 65. And it's all flat, as you can see, so it's pretty much ineffective. I mean, you're gonna bounce a shot every once in a million years in these kind of angles, but it's not really gonna happen too often. A turret is the same thing. Even the angled cheeks are just terrible, so you're not really gonna bounce anything. You have a pretty bad gun mantlet as well. Like, there's no armor on this thing really to speak of. The cupola is obvious weakness as well in close range hull down fights. And this gun mantlet does... Like, you would think that the gun mantlet shaped like this, that is angled like fucking pretty much 90 degrees towards somebody. If you would shoot the gun mantlet in the angle where, like, all the armor should be, it should actually do something. And I guess it does absorb some of the shots, but for the most part, I don't know. Like, it can absorb some shots, I guess, but I wouldn't count on this to save you at any point at all. Before we get into the game, there's not really a lot to talk about. Let's just look at the gun depression real quick. So it's 6 degrees all around. Not too terrible, I guess, for a tank with a gun like this at tier 6. So, yeah, let's get into the game. And here's the game, ends tier 8 game, which immediately indicates that this tank doesn't have premium matchmaking or preferential matchmaking, as that is a thing of past in World of Tanks. So that is something you should note before even considering buying this. But whatever, let's talk about the stats before we get into too much action. So I am going to be comparing this to the VK3001P, the German tier 6 medium, as they do have really similar guns and they're similar in most aspects. So you have 700 health, top speed forwards 50, backwards 20, track traverse 38, turret traverse 32. Top speed limit is worse than on the VK, and the power to weight 17.6 is pretty damn healthy. Slightly worse than on the VK, but the terrain resistance is much better than on the VK, so this is slightly faster than the VK. The VK also gets 8 degrees of gun depression, so in general the VK gets ahead of the Skoda a bit in every aspect pretty much. When we come to the gun, you have a pretty interesting gun. It is an 8.8 centimeter. It's pretty much the same gun that the VK uses, so 220 damage, 132 penetration, which is obviously the biggest link of this gun. 913 DPM, which isn't too bad. Dispersion 100 meters, 0.37, and yeah, I mean, it's a pretty hard-hitting gun if you can get around the lack of penetration, obviously. And the view range is 370, which kind of limits you to using binos over optics unless you get an insane crew, which is a bit unlikely as there's no other Czech tanks in the game at the moment. So pretty bad matchmaking here, a lot of tier 8s, a lot of tier 6s as well, so I guess it could have been worse, but at the same time, like, this gun does not really like to shoot at anything above tier 6. With the 132 pen, you really try to avoid targets over tier 6, as you just don't have the pen to really do anything to them. But playing against Encounter, I like to be aggressive on the rails, especially when I'm bottom tier. My tank is kind of like expendable. If I die, it doesn't really matter too much, so playing aggressive, taking a lot of risks can really pay off very well, and it might in this game as well. So we meet an SDA2 here who isn't paying any attention, so we can shoot him through the train. I do spot the RD as well, so that's gonna be my next concern. It doesn't seem that he has even noticed me, so it should be a pretty easy kill here. As you can see, the reload and the DPM is pretty healthy. I mean, it could be, the DPM could be better if you compare it to something like a Cromwell, but I mean, for hitting for 220 at tier 6, the DPM isn't too bad anyways. In comparison, you do actually get a better DPM with this thing than with a T-34-85, even though that hits for only 180, but has some penetration advantage over you, which obviously is this tank's biggest downside, and you really have to know what you can and cannot pen with 130 pen, and play accordingly, or just load more gold or whatever floats your boat. And here we played, like, I don't even know what this guy's doing, so we just kill him after he stops looking at us, and just gonna push on forwards and go for the IS now. Shooting him through the fence with 130 pen is probably, well, it wasn't a great idea. As you could see, I hit his truck there probably. Unfortunately, I do take that shot in return, but I could afford it, so it's not that big of a deal anyways. And while the aiming times on the paper look pretty decent, you can really notice the lack of efficient crew and lack of gun length drive. Well, not gun length drive, lack of word stab. Really, you can feel the difference between this 2.3 second aiming time and 2.3 second aiming time on the tier 10 or whatever medium that actually can carry word stab. So the gun can be really frustrating. I imagine it will improve quite a bit with a better crew, but at the same time, I mean, you hit for 220 at tier 6. As long as you can pen what you're shooting at, this gun can be devastating, and you don't really want to be sitting in front of this even when you're in tier 8. This tank is especially nasty when you can shoot tier 8 mediums for free without obviously getting shot back. It will really put the hurt on them, and it can be really nasty, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. So now we clear the other side of the rails, and there's 2 tanks to go. IS-6 is probably the worst tank you can ever be shooting at with this. The only thing you can really pen is an ass of an IS-6 in a pretty damn flat angle, and he can just shit on you everywhere. But one thing I've learned in all the tanks is that tomatoes, they're blind. They react to sound and getting shot. So as long as you don't shoot people like this, they usually don't shoot you back either. You know, they're peaceful beings, these tomatoes and IS-6s. So you just avoid shooting them if you don't have a perfect angle, and they'll just leave. They just leave. It's like, you know, they're like animals. Like, they don't hurt you until you hurt them, you know? So we let the IS-6 go around his day without really touching him for now. We're gonna go and try to flank him to actually be able to pen him. As I said, the only real way to pen an IS-6 is a flat shot into his ass. One thing you do get over the VK 3001P is that you get a pretty good heat round for a 200 pen. At tier 6, that's pretty healthy. You still really don't want to be shooting IS-6 in the side or the front with 200 heat pen, so we just let him leave, and we'll shoot him in the ass with AP, as that doesn't really matter. We just play on his fields here. He didn't really like that light tank, so he killed that one, and now I have a clear ass shot on him, and he does get ambushed by Ari, and now we just need to put him down, and it's gonna be over really quickly for him. He will probably manage to turn around his turret and shoot me, but at this point I don't really care, as I do have plenty of health to just tank it unless I get like one shot ammo wrecked or something. So yeah, I do take the shot in the face, but we should be able to kill him now and pick up our top gun in a tier 8 game in a Skoda. And here's the end plate. Ace Tanker, 5,589 experience with the ×2, and premium count 2,834 damage done, 989 assisted. Got a medal for killing 2 tiers higher tanks, and I got a top gun as well. 1,620 base experience. A pretty healthy game for Skoda. Not really gonna happen all that often, especially in tier 8 games, but a pretty healthy 70k profit as well. And now down to the question, is this thing worth the gold? Well, if we dispatch it from the shitty bundle that it is in now, this thing should cost 3.7k gold. If it ever makes it to the store or the in-game store or whatever. And that is not actually a terrible price for a premium tank that can put out some pretty decent results every once in a while. Comparing it to something like an IS-2 that costs only like 1.4k gold more, it is definitely much worse, and the IS-2 is by far the better buy there. But since you can't really buy the IS-2, and if you really don't like the IS-2 and the guns like that, this is actually not a terrible budget premium. But at the same time, you do have to be willing to cooperate with a terrible pen, or you're just gonna sling a lot of gold and not make any credits. But it all comes down pretty much what I said at the start. The only way I can really see this being a viable purchase is if you want to buy the Czech medium tank line, and it's not out yet, so I'm not really gonna be talking about that too much. But if you're super interested into that tank line, I could see you buying it. It's not a terrible purchase as well. I would really just want them to not sell it in some shitty bundle, so they wouldn't. It wouldn't cost 20 euros and would cost 15 and 16 that it should. But Either way, not a terrible premium tank, but not really worth the gold on its own.